Hello, it's Dawn Michelle and welcome back to my channel. Today we're going to do another installment of playing with pairs. This time we're going to be playing with Pip decks. So I was inspired to do this whole video because of my Labyrinth tarot. So I recently watched the movie Labyrinth. I think I posted about it in my Facebook group and stuff because I was like doing some tedious coding work and I just needed something that was just like had good energy and all of that. So I turned that on, which is one of my like ultimate favorite comfort shows and like has been since like the 80s, right? And so I wanted to pull out my Labyrinth tarot and play with it. And while I was watching the movie, like I had this whole thought in the back of my head that like I need to pair this deck with the Into the Lonely Woods, which is the Oracle deck that I have here. And this pretty much prompted this whole idea of doing an entire video of pairing up my Pip decks. So now if you are unfamiliar with the term pips, a Pip deck is a deck where the minors are just illustrated with the number of things on the card. So here we have the 8 of cups. I cannot remember what it's actually called in this deck, but you can see here we have just 8 things on the card. Here's the 2 of feathers here, and then we see just 2 feathers. Now, often in a Pip deck, the courts are illustrated, so we have a full scene depicted. Look at that King of Junk, I love it. But the minors are where we just kind of go into like almost like a playing card, right? It's just the number of things on the card. Sometimes there is significance to the placement and sometimes they're not. This particular deck is very much a Pip deck because there is no scene whatsoever being depicted in the numbered minors. It's just the number of whatever things it is on the card. So that's kind of what a Pip deck is versus like the standard RWS or Rider-Waite-Smith Golden Dawn inspired decks that we tend to see where we get like a full scene illustrated, kind of like we see here in the courts and the majors in a Pip deck where we'll have an entire scene based around that card and what that card means, whereas in a Pip deck it's just the number of things. Again, kind of like a playing card. Now this is different than a Marseille, which does have an actual like system to it. A Pip deck doesn't necessarily have a system beyond just having a numerical value and being in alignment with the suit association. So today we're going to look at 10 Pip decks that I'm going to pair with some of my oracles because I do find that having an oracle, a Pip deck with a pretty fleshed out oracle, which most of these are, really does make for some beautiful readings. So I kind of wanted to just take a moment and like highlight the use of a Pip deck, particularly working with oracle. Now these I think are all, with the exception of one, these are all new pairings. So these are completely untried and untested, but that is kind of the point of these videos, is to offer me the opportunity to play with some of the decks in my collection to see what else it would pair with. So that's kind of the lens through which we're going to view things through. And we're going to start off with the Into the Lonely Woods, which is a favorite deck of mine. I call this my Ludo deck. So if you are familiar with the world of the Labyrinth movie, and by extension, there's Ludo. Look at him coming right up there for us. He's my favorite character in that movie. And so when I saw this deck, when I first started working with it, I was like, it has so Ludo energy for me. And so like, I just call it my Ludo deck. And so like, it just seemed completely appropriate to pair it with my Labyrinth tarot. And I cannot remember if I've actually done this before, this particular pairing. If not, like, I don't know what took me so long to do it, because like these figures these creatures in the Into the Lonely Woods all feel like they could be a part of Ludo's family. And so I feel like it just exists beautifully in this world. So it does have little messages down at the bottom. And one of the things that I really like about pairing a pretty heavily illustrated oracle deck with a Pip deck is that it does give me like a lot to work with, even when I just have a deck that just has numerical and you know, suit associations with it, which totally works for me because that is how I learned to read tarot, was very numerological and elemental, and so I don't need the fully illustrated scenes for me to be able to work with a card. I do love having them, but a pairing like this does help me to be able to work with a Pip deck, even when sometimes maybe I might struggle with the associations. So now some of the cards and the coloring don't like 100% line up in terms of like the aesthetics of it. However, the messages I think are gonna work out pretty well. So we have drink from your own well, water your own garden between the Hermit and the Queen of Pots. I mean, how perfect is that? Again, aesthetically, it was just like these creatures feel like they could have stepped out of that movie. They feel like they could be a part of Ludo's family or Ludo's world. So here we have the Plate of the Wanderer with the Hierophant, who is Hoggle, and the two of, shields, pentacles, whatever it is that they're called in this deck. I can't ever remember. So we have to watch over you with the Empress and the two of, let's just say feathers, because again, I can't remember. Oh, it is feathers. Look at that. I was right. Going deep. Look at the green color. Love that. So yeah, I just thought this would be a fun one because, oh, look, doesn't that look like Ludo? I mean, it looks like a baby Ludo, and I just think that that's amazing. Do not hide your light with the King of Feathers and the two or three of whatever that is. I can't remember. I think it's the Pentacles. Like, I can't remember the actual names of all the suits. So our shadows are beautiful with the, I think this is the Seven of Junk and the World. Beautiful. Time to rest a while. Like, I do think these work really well together. Time to move on with the Emperor and Judgment. That's amazing. Like, that's a great message. Love forgives distance with the Knight of Feathers and Justice with the little hand wall. Pretty cool. But you can see here when we have like just pips, it really does give us something to kind of like focus on, to key into, because we have the fully fleshed out image here in the Oracle along with the key phrase. Death moves among us. Yes, it does. Your presence is a gift to others with the Tower. That's kind of funny. All right, let's just do one more here. What did we lose? The Three of Poles, I think that is, and the Fool with Sarah. That's pretty beautiful. So the next Pip deck that I want to pair up is my Antique Anatomy Tarot. This is the indie edition, but there is a mass market edition. I'll be sure to leave that linked for you in the description box below. I think they're pretty similar. I don't think there's a ton of changes between the two. I just prefer this edition. And then I'm going to pair it up with my Le Vampire Oracle, which is an Oracle deck that I really love. It has the Jasmine Beckett Griffith artwork. I think it's a Lucy Cavendish. Hopefully that is correct, but this is an amazing Oracle deck. I really love the energy of it. I really love the messages. And although I wouldn't normally, I don't think I've ever paired the Antique Anatomy with it, I feel like their energies are really going to be compatible. So we have Love Conquers All with enduring loyalty, eternal love, and lasting commitment between the star and the world. How perfect is that? Definitely lasting with that world energy. Courtesy with justice and the Ten of Rods. Beautiful. I feel like the color play is going to be really cool in this deck too, because you can see wherever, like, okay, so the red, with the pomegranate in here, and then the red muscles, like that would be where my eye is definitely drawn to. And the coloring of her eyes almost kind of mimics the flowers over here. So those would be connections that I could make, which would be really cool. Again, I just thought this would be a really fun one and just kind of interesting because I don't think I've paired this particular Pip deck with this Oracle. But again, we're looking at an Oracle deck that has a really expansive imagery. The keywords are great too, and that's always really helpful. But we have a full kind of scene depicted here in these particular cards. And then we have the Pip deck on the side, which kind of just fleshes out that, like gives us a little bit of a deeper layer. And we don't get too bogged down into the additional sort of imagery happening in the tarot. In this case, like the Oracle deck really becomes like the anchor for the message. It is the message, it is the focal point. And then we look to the tarot to just flesh that out further. So without having like full scenes depicted on the tarot deck as well, we can really hone in on what's going on in this and then just use this to deepen that, which I really do love. I mean, I often use Oracle as a focal point, but I feel like in this type of a reading or in this type of a style, pairing it with a Pip deck, it becomes even more substantial in the reading, which I think is really cool. So here we have Witness with the Ace, or the Queen of Blades, and the Two of Elixirs. To know personal evidence and speak out. Yeah, I'm really digging the energy of these two. Again, kind of balancing that heavily illustrated artwork with the more minimalistic illustrated artwork, I think creates space also in a reading. Sometimes when we get like Oracle and Tarot, we get a lot of it going on the table and they're like all heavily illustrated, that can be a lot of energy for me. And sometimes little pairings like these, where we're really just kind of focused on a single imagery and then using the tarot to kind of deepen and expand upon it, like it creates space. It creates a little bit of stillness that I can really sink into this message. It's like here we have the outsider, the misfit, the loner, the wanderer between the Empress and the Wheel of Fortune. Beautiful. Here, we'll just do a couple more of these because like I'm really kind of digging this. I usually like pair the Antique Anatomy with like, you know, other botanical decks and stuff like that, but I really love the idea of pairing it with the Le Vampire Oracle. I think it works beautiful. And I love that there's like botanicals in the Oracle deck as well. So there's oftentimes where we can pull those tie-ins together. So the next Pip deck that I want to pair up is the Skyrim Tarot. And this deck was actually a little bit of a surprise. At first I was kind of like, disappointed because like, I mean, yeah, it's a Pip deck. And really this art style is not indicative to the Skyrim world. It's actually more Final Fantasy in terms of like the actual style of the art itself. But for a Pip deck, I actually really like this deck. It works really well. It's very clean. It's very simple. I don't really struggle with the messages. So it's a great one to work with when I'm looking for that Pip deck energy. And I really haven't found a ton that it pairs with really well, but I recently just got in the Mantra Oracle, and this is a deck that I've heavily modified. So originally it had kind of borders and lines, and it was gilded, and it was too big and awkward for me to handle. So I trimmed it down, and I've started to edge it. So like there's only half a deck here because here's the other half unedged. So just a little fun mod sneak in there. So I've only pulled out the cards that I've actually edged, but this is a very new deck in my collection. I actually bought it, well, I bought it in the middle of watching Lisa's Hot Takes, but I also bought it specifically to pair with another few decks that I have in my collection, which we'll probably be seeing later on my channel. And I wanted to use it together with them, but when I was looking through it as I was like edging it, and I'll probably finish edging it while I edit this video when I'm done, I was like, oh, I think it'll actually pair really well with the Skyrim Tarot. Again, we're looking at those very quiet sort of energy here. Like for me, a Pip deck it's a pretty quiet deck most of the time. There is one exception that I have in here. We'll talk about that when we get to it. But a lot of the times it's a very quiet sort of deck because most of the Pips are just, you know, the number of things illustrated on the card. And when we do get a court or a major arcana, like they're in this particular deck, they're not even overly illustrated. So they're a little bit more on the minimalistic side overall. And I feel like it makes for a really beautiful kind of succinct, quiet reading. And I thought really pairing it with the Mantra Oracle would bring that energy in even more. So I feel like artistically and aesthetically, they go together actually really well, but it was more also about the energetics of it because the Mantra Oracle does feel quite quiet. It feels calm, and it seems weird to say that in relation to like a video game deck, right? Like Skyrim is like a fantasy based, like kind of, you know, fighting adventure style game. And this, again, I don't feel that the Skyrim Tarot really reflects the energy of that at all. But it is a lovely Pip deck, and I really do actually enjoy working with it. I really like the artwork. It's just, I don't see it as being Skyrim, and that's totally cool. It exists in its own kind of world and place for me. But because it does have that very quiet energy for me, it's a quiet deck, even though it's based on this thing that's totally not quiet. It's a very quiet reader, and I thought pairing it with the Mantra Oracle would just bring that in even more. So we have connected to the universal consciousness with Judgment and the Three of Arms. Beautiful. We'll just do a few more of these. Breaking free from control with the 10 of Lockpicks and the Knight of Voice. Beautiful. That's a great message. the Unrestricted Courage with the Page of Voice and the Four of Voice. Love that. Okay, let's do one more. The Horn of Plenty with the Hanged Man and the Two of Spells. Yeah, I think those go together actually really well. I like the energy of that. So the next Pip deck is the Wooden Tarot, and this is a longtime favorite in my collection. It is a really kind of unique little Pip deck. It has very strong elemental numerological energy for me. Again, you can see that the quartz and the majors have more of an illustration going on, but then when we get to the numbered minors, there's kind of just the very minimalistic imagery and just kind of the number of things for the most part. This one is more of like what we would say like a Pippy style deck, whereas the Skyrim Tarot is like a straight up Pip deck. There's no scene depicted. In this, there is a little bit of scene depicted. So most of these decks actually are like, they're Pip-ish, meaning that they lean more into the Pip than they do the full scenic minors, but they do have scenes. There is stuff to work with there. So this time I thought I would pair it with the Woodland Wardens. I just felt like, you know, kind of being in that wooden sort of world with the plants and the animals, I just thought this might work really well. Again, this is a totally untested pairing. So let's see how these two work together. So we have the Turtle and Coriander with the Six of Bones and the King of Stones. That's pretty cool. I like that. I feel like the Woodland Wardens is going to give like some context to the Wooden Tarot. And that's another thing that I think pairing a more illustrated oracle deck with a Pip deck is really helpful, because like we can look at this and go mischief. Okay, so we have the Knight of Blooms and the Seven of Plumes, so Seven of Swords, for mischief with the marten and the foxglove. And we can use that to give us some context about the thing that we're reading about or what our focal point is. This isn't like a super detailed oracle deck like we saw with the Vampire or the Into the Lonely Woods, but there's certainly, I think, more going on because we have an animal, plant, and a keyword. So we have kind of like three energies we can tap into working with this particular deck paired with the Wooden Tarot. So we have the Hawk, the Thistle with Graceful Persistence between the Eight of Blooms and the Hanged Man. That's really cool. Yeah, I thought that these energies might align really well and that the messages might come together in a really beautiful way working with these two decks. And the Wooden Tarot is a deck that like I really haven't paired a ton with it. I often pair it with my sort of like Antique Anatomy style decks. So the Oracle decks by that same creator, like the Oracle of Oddities, I often pair with it. That is out of print. And occasionally the Earthbound Oracle, which is an Oracle deck by the same creator. But I often like to like mismatch my creators. So I don't usually like to pair like the matching tarot and Oracle together most of the time. I want to pull in a different sort of energy, a different voice. Sometimes when the Oracle and Tarot is by the same creator, they just kind of start blending and mushing together on the table. I mean, sometimes it's great and it creates really succinct readings, but sometimes I'm like, it's just a little mushy for me. So I love this. I think this works really great. It's very earthy. The Woodland Wardens feels very like into the real world, and the Wooden Tarot feels very much into the surreal world. So there's almost this kind of like fantasy versus reality sort of energy going on here. Like maybe what we think is going on versus what is actually going on type of a thing. Or maybe what is actually known and what is perceived, right? Those can be two different things. So yeah, I think this is a really cool pairing. I actually really like this. I'm gonna have to play with this some more. So I feel like they do go together really well. So the Sheep and the Blackberry with Devotion between the Tower and the Page of Bones. That's super cool. So speaking of decks with like tarot and oracles by the same creator, I have one of my favorite pick decks here, which is the Ophidia Rosa Tarot. This is a Pip deck that I had to work really hard to understand and to get to know. It was totally worth it in the end, but it's a bit of a challenging Pip deck to work with, I think, until you start really looking at it elementally, numerologically, and then adding in a very heavy dose of intuition with this deck. It definitely took me doing a deep dive study study with it. I'm writing poetry around this deck, which is a process I'm still working with. But this is a deck that's really hard for me to pair. I do end up pairing it a lot with just its sister Oracle decks. So I was really looking for something that I could pair it with that would be a bit different, bring a different energy. And I pulled out my modern Nirvana because I feel like these are really succinct keywords, and I really don't struggle with what this deck is trying to tell me most of the time. It's very direct, and the guidebook is really, really wonderful. So I thought that maybe pairing like a harder to read deck with a easy to understand oracle, that might kind of sort of balance each other out. So we have resistance with the 5 of Wands and the 4 of Cups. That's awesome. Again, getting into the guidebook for the Oracle deck would be amazing. So we have the Rose Phoenix with the Queen of Wands and the 2 of Wands. This would be one of the cards that I would need to get into the guidebook for, because there are some sigils in this deck. Here's another one, although authentic expression, like I know what that means to me. So some of them I can work with, and some of them I do have to jump into the guidebook. Why do I have all the sigils on top? That's kind of funny. But I thought maybe just pairing these together with this really kind of simple, illustrated, very kind of to the point oracle deck, like there's a lot that happens in the guidebook of this deck, but on the whole, like I don't really struggle with what the oracle deck's trying to tell me. You know, I have a pretty good idea of like what rebirth means, and tapping into this imagery and looking at the energy of it, and then I can apply that and see how does that relate to the Page of Swords and the Empress. Like the Empress with rebirth, that's beautiful. So yeah, I thought these might be really interesting together. I think aesthetically they work pretty well, but it was more about trying to find a pairing that worked with the Ophidia Rosa that would kind of help open the Ophidia Rosa up. So sometimes I need to like work with a tarot deck alongside an oracle in order to sort of just unlock it. Sometimes that just helps me to sort of look at the deck through a different lens, because sometimes when I'm working with a pip deck, like I can get a little too locked into my sort of traditional way of reading, which is, you know, elemental, numerological, which pip deck works great for. But sometimes I can get a little too locked into that, and then I don't let the energy of the deck actually flow through. And at that point, like I might as well just be using a deck of playing cards. Not that there's anything wrong with that, but if I'm not going to let the imagery somewhat inform my reading, then I feel like I'm using the wrong system. So when I kind of get myself locked into those patterns, I feel like this type of a pairing really helps me to kind of step outside of that and to look at these cards, and these, particularly these pip cards, in a different way, and through that lens, using that oracle deck as a way to really hone in on what that might be talking about. So here we have forgiveness between the Ace of Pentacles and the 9 of Swords. Beautiful. Yeah, let's do one more. I really like this one. I think it's a different sort of pairing, and I really like the way the energy is coming through these two decks. So we have Strength with the King of Wands and the 8 of Cups. Beautiful. So the next pairing is one that I feel like is really the only one in this whole collection of decks that I have that I wouldn't consider calm and quiet. This is the Cursed Auguries Tarot. There are many challenging cards in this deck. There's lots of spiders, there's nails going through hands, things like that. I have taken out, I think, what is probably most of the challenging cards and just tried to leave, you know, more of the pip style cards. But again, you can see very, very clear pip deck. There's just 3 of Cups there. There's just 3 tadpoles and 8. And, you know, 6 wands. So this is very much a pip deck, similar to the Skyrim Tarot, where we don't have any sort of a scene really illustrated on most of the numbered cards, if any, and the illustration comes through the majors and the court cards. So again, it's a very challenging one. I think it's actually one of my favorites. I really love this deck because it does something so different. But like I was talking about in the beginning of the video, where I was talking about pip decks being very quiet, this one does not feel quiet to me. So this is the one deck in this whole collection that or the pairing that I feel like isn't quiet. I feel like what this one does is actually bring shadow and challenge to the reading. And I've chosen to pair it with the Samhain, Seasons of the Witch Samhain Oracle. I think this is my favorite of the decks so far that they've released or that I have. There's just something about the energy of this deck that's just really unique, and I love that I can pair it with so many different things, and it works outside of the Samhain season. It's a great deck for any sort of kind of dark energy sort of deck, or dipping into shadow or the unknown. It's great for the dark moon time or the new moon time. And I just thought that maybe that energy would serve really well with the Cursed Auguries, also giving us something really focal to key into. So here we have apples with the Tower and the Ace of Cups. So, you know, we can read the little messages down at the bottom to give us a bit more context. But these two, when I was like kind of picking out decks to really to play with and to try with my Pip decks, like this was kind of a standout one. I was really sort of blown away by how well these two decks actually went together. I feel like the Seasons of the Witch really brings out these sort of magical, mystical energy of the Cursed Auguries, which sometimes can feel really brutal and just sort of into the like harsh reality of the world. And pairing it with the Seasons of the Witch like gave it this different sort of level. So when I see the apples and the pentacles, like it makes me think of, we had it, even the apple card, right? So it makes me think of the magic, the inherent magic in apple. And there's, you know, snakes in this and skulls and things like that. And we can see the inherent magic in these things, even like the nails. And I love that sort of idea of looking at this deck through this whole different lens. And so it's really kind of changed a little bit my perspective of the Cursed Auguries. It's always been a deck that I've really loved, but I definitely want to spend some time playing with this because pairing it with the Seasons of the Witch completely changed the energy of it. It took it like out of that sort of dark and creepy into the like really macabre sort of thing. Like I said, the really brutal side of life, which we definitely still see here. But it also helped me to see the magic within that, like the energy and the healing and the change that can come through those challenging times. So I think in this case, this is like an instance where the Oracle deck has really shifted the energy of the tarot. So if I were to pair this tarot with something like the, you know, the Memento Mori Oracle, like that would take on a totally different lens as well. And I just think it's really cool how like an Oracle deck can really shift how I see and experience a tarot deck. And this is like just the most excellent example of that for me, because I've always seen the Cursed Auguries as being like, yeah, that's the harsh reality of nature and life. But now I can see that there's like, through the lens of the Seasons of the Witch, I can see that there is magic in that too. Like there's room for both to exist, to coexist, and I think that's fantastic. All right, last one, because I feel like I've talked about this one for quite a bit. Gorgeous. So kind of shifting back into decks that are tarot decks that are like, they're Pippy-ish, right? Or they're a little bit Pippy. We have the Forager's Daughter Tarot here. This is like one of my favorite Pip style decks, meaning that like there is stuff going on in the numbered minors. Like here's our Four of Wands. There is like, there's stuff to dive into. There's stuff to help us to understand the energy of that Four of Wands, but it is a little bit more in the Pip style of things, right? It's not quite as illustrated as say like a Rider-Waite-Smith. We get more of that sort of Pip style nature. So this, a deck like this, and I have a couple of these in here, really sits in that in-between space of, you know, it's not 100% a Pip deck like with the Cursed Auguries or the Skyrim Tarot, but it's also not really a fully scenic Rider-Waite-Smith sort of deck. For me, this deck definitely sits in the elemental and numerological realm of things, and that's another criteria which I use to determine like whether a deck is a Pip deck or not, because the following the numbers and the elements is different than following the Rider-Waite-Smith system, or it varies quite a bit at the time. And I'm pretty sure I've shown this pairing before, but this is like my favorite pairing to use for the Forager's Daughter, and this is the Magickal Herb Oracle, I think. I've shown this deck many times on my channel. I really enjoy it. One of the things that I like about pairing these two together is that sometimes there can be quite a bit going on in the Forager's Daughter in terms of like, we have animals and we have elements and we have like the number of things. So like, you know, 5 of Cups with the lobster there, right? And there's water coming down. And then we have the King of Wands with the wand and the trees and the flowers. Like there can be a lot for a pip deck here. And the magical herb just kind of like creates a breathing space around it. So whereas I feel like where we're looking at most of these, where the Oracle deck is actually more of the heavily illustrated focal point, in this particular pairing, the Oracle deck actually kind of becomes the less illustrated kind of breathing space between. Like it's still a focal point, right? We have Desire between the Two of Swords and the Wheel of Fortune. That's still the focal point. But it creates this breathing room around the Forager's Daughter that allows me to kind of look into those messages deeper. Of course, I'm looking at them through the lens of awakening. So how does awakening relate to this imagery of the sun and whatever, you know, my question would be, and that I've pulled these cards around, as well as, you know, relate to the magician, or does the sun lead to the awakening of the magician, right? There's many different ways that you can read decks like these and work with tarot and oracle together. That's really outside the scope of this video, but I do really like this pairing because I feel like the magical herb does kind of create that, a really beautiful focal point, but it also creates a little bit of space, a little bit of breathing room, because there can be quite a bit going on in the Forager's Daughter Tarot, which is not always the case with pip decks. So it's really interesting when you get a little bit busier pip deck. So yeah, I know I've shown this one before, so I'm not going to linger on it too long because like it's an old favorite of mine. I've had both of these decks for many years and I really enjoy working with them and using them together. So again, looking at decks that are like pretty pippish, but a little also into the scenic realm. This is the Anima Mundi Tarot, and you'll see that we have, you know, just kind of a more minimalistic style deck. There is a bit of a scene here. So unlike the other traditional pip style decks, this is more in that kind of hybrid space of it's pretty pippy. But if you are like only really comfortable working with an RWS and you come across a deck like this can be a bit of a challenge to read with because there isn't your traditional RWS scene being depicted in a lot of these cards. And so I've included decks like this in this selection. So the Anima Mundi I thought would pair really well with the Sacred Destiny. Funny enough, both of these decks I rehomed and repurchased. So they kind of have that in common as well. But I just thought maybe the Sacred Destiny, because again, it kind of exists in the sort of real world-esque, but there's a bit of sort of fantasy to it. It's kind of an interesting deck. Anyway, again, we have this beautiful focal point with the Oracle in the center with Pleasure, looking at the Three of Swords and the Queen of Cups. That's really interesting. So here we have Embracing with the Two of Swords and the Lovers. Look at the birds, 2 birds. That's really cool. So yeah, I just thought this might be a really wonderful one for really just creating that sort of focal point keyword. Definitely we can tie into the imagery. We have the Orca and the King of Cups, which I absolutely love. Adventures, orcas are very adventurous, following their star, following their, you know, sort of intuitive nature. Yep, they're very good at that. Protection with the 8 of Cups and the 6 of Pentacles. That's beautiful. I do really like the way that these go together, and I feel like this again is another pairing that's very calm. It really creates a lot of space for me to dive deep into what these cards are maybe telling me, or how would they make me feel, right? What my inner voice is guiding me toward as I'm working with these particular decks together. I love decks like this that create this really beautiful kind of quiet, safe space for me to dive into this. Look at this, the flow between the Devil and the Emperor. How cool is that? I also absolutely love that the only human in this deck is the Devil. Like that, I think is just amazing. Solitude with the King of Pentacles and the 3 of Pentacles is beautiful. You have to remember, like, to do the work, you do have to like have some solitude time to get the things done, right? Beautiful. Change, 2 of Cups, High Priestess. Yeah, I love the energy of these together. Trust with the Ace of Wands and the Magician. I think these are actually really, really good. Again, I think all but the Forager's Daughter, the rest of these are all completely new pairings. So I'm excited to give these a try because I think they're actually going to work really well together. I also love that, like, aesthetically, the white borders. Like, I love when I can, like, if I'm going to have borders, I love when the borders match. Like, just saying. Okay, last one. Inner Peace with the Three of Wands and the World. Beautiful. Okay, so this next pairing I really just threw in here for fun. This is the Transient Light Tarot. This is like a really Pip style deck that I picked up at one of the Hay House sales just because I was curious. I like the aesthetics of it. It feels, again, kind of in that calm space. It feels maybe like it might read really numerologically and elementally because, like, it's not got a lot going on, so you can really sort of tap into what those things mean to you and to your own intuition and stuff. I love that Six of Swords. It's awesome. But I really haven't, like, besides edging it, I really haven't played with it much. So I was like trying to find anything that I thought might fit in this space. And I did really struggle with it. So for fun, I just pulled out my Garden Dragons because, like, this is just a for fun deck. I really actually do love working with these little Garden Dragons. I think they're kind of amazing and they read actually really well for me. But I thought that maybe they might sit okay in this space with the Transient Light. And maybe they might have something to offer in working with this deck. So we have the Eggplant Dragon, with fun between the Ten of Vessels and the Five of Swords. That's interesting. We gotta make some space for the fun even when things are not so fantastic, right? Carrot Dragon with Observe and Two of Swords and the Ace of Swords. I don't know how I feel about this one, but, like, I really don't have anything that I felt like went really well with the Transient Light. And I'll be honest, it's not a deck I'm 100% sure I'm gonna keep. It's in the, like, I need to play with it more. To see if it's even gonna end up, like, really resonating with me. Like, aesthetically, I think it's cool, but I don't know that I really like get much from working with it. And that's interesting to say in a video talking about Pip decks because I hear that a lot when people talk about Pip decks. Like, it doesn't give them enough to work with, and I can totally understand that. I really enjoy Pip decks, and, like, every Pip deck besides this one that I've shown with you today are decks that I really enjoy working with and I've gotten a lot of really great readings and done some really great work with. But for whatever reason, this Transient Light one just isn't quite hitting where I want it to hit. And that could just be because I haven't put the time and effort into it. It does have some really wonderful cards that I think are really smart. But, like, on the whole, I haven't really just had much of an experience with it so far. So I thought maybe, you know, pairing it with the Garden Dragons would just, like, bring a little bit of fun to the work. But, like, I'm not really convinced here. Love this Coffee Dragon. He's my favorite in the deck. All right, let's do one more because I'm not really convinced about this one. I do love the Coconut Dragon too with multitask, the Keeper of Swords and the Nine of Vessels. I mean, that works, like, right? We've got this Nine of Vessels over here and, like, this Keeper of Swords with, like, the crossed swords and the key. Like, I think that that's actually kind of cool little message. Like, you do have to sometimes try to multitask things in order to get all the things done. Although, like, there's that whole theory that, like, multitasking is a myth. You can't literally do two things at once, but that's a whole nother topic. So yeah, I'm not convinced, but it was fun to play with. If you have a deck that you pair with the Transient Light, definitely let me know because I would be curious to hear about it. So the last pairing that I have for you is the Pagan Otherworlds, which mine is pretty heavily modified. I do have a whole video if you want to see how I modified my deck, but I made it smaller and I edged it and all that kind of good stuff. This is, again, as another sort of hybrid Pip deck where it is really Pippy, but there is some scenic layer going on within the cards. This is a great one, I think, if you want to sort of, like, bridge the gap between your traditional Rider-Waite-Smith and working with a straight up Pip deck. This one I think is wonderful for that because there is, like, there's tie-ins and it can help you really kind of sort of bridge that gap, make that transition. It's just also, like, a really beautiful deck. I love working with it now that it's smaller and I can actually handle it. So I was looking at my collection and going, what have I not paired this deck with that might be fun to try? And I ended up pulling out my Celtic Spirit Oracle. I feel like I pull this deck out all the time. It sits in so many different places for me. It's definitely like earning its spot as being a really versatile deck in my collection because I've paired it with a lot of really interesting different things. But I thought these two might just be fun to pair together. Again, just really giving us that really succinct focal point. This also feels very much like a quiet pairing where we could really take our time and we could dive into the portal of these cards. That's another thing that this deck definitely does for me is it makes me feel like I'm sort of stepping through the portal into this other realm. And so I think that's one of the reasons why I chose this deck, and probably specifically because this card comes up for me a lot and I have used it in specific readings. So being that the Pagan Otherworlds actually feels like a portal in and of itself, I thought this would be a really interesting deck to pair it with. It has a really similar kind of energy and vibe, and like aesthetically, I think it actually works together really well. The whole thing just feels very quiet. It feels like it's inviting you to step into this place and really explore this realm through your intuitive hits. This is so cool. Master of the Hunt with speed, masculinity, and flow between the Devil and the Page of Swords. That's pretty cool. I really like these together. It's an interesting sort of pairing because I tend to pair my Pagan Otherworlds with, I don't know, more almost like, I pair it with a lot of botanical decks, but I also pair it with a lot of sort of like old world style decks. But I love adding this sort of Celtic-y Fae energy to it. I feel like it really brings that out of the Pagan Otherworlds as well. So we have the Gift with communication, gift, and crystals between the star and death. That's pretty beautiful. I mean, death can be a gift too. Yeah, I kind of like these. I think that it really adds a little bit of that sort of magical fae kind of energy the Celtic Spirit does to the work with the Pagan Otherworlds, where it encourages me to actually get beyond the sort of old world style of it and see it more through that magical lens, which is really cool. The Weavers with the Four of Swords and the Ace of Swords. That's beautiful. Fate, manifestation, and decisions. We'll just do a couple more because this one's just fun. I just think it's beautiful. Love this Queen of Pentacles as well. Yeah, I'm excited to try this one too. Oh, it does have an extra Seeker card. It also has extra Moon cards. I don't keep the Moon cards in, but I do have the Seeker card in. The Fool with the Green Fairy, Mischief, Freedom, and Reckless with the Eight of Pentacles. That's beautiful. Okay, last one. The She, Ancient Knowledge, Help, and Dimensional with the Queen of Wands and the Five of Swords. That's beautiful. So that was actually a lot of fun. I really do love pairing my Pip decks with my Oracle decks. I think that's a really great way to work with that energy. Again, they allow me to read very numerologically, elementally, which is my foundation, my baseline for that. And so I really enjoy working with Pip decks. But adding in that Oracle layer is just always really fun. And it was really cool to pull out a lot of my favorite Pip decks. And to see like kind of what I had in my collection that I hadn't paired it with, hadn't tried it with, and there were some definite ones that really stood out to me that I was like, wow, that's kind of amazing. The Antique Anatomy with the Labyrinth Tarot, the Pagan Otherworlds with the Celtic Spirit Oracle, and then like I said, that Cursed Auguries with the Seasons of the Witch Samhain, that one just kind of blew me away. Love that. I'm definitely looking forward to like playing with these all more. I should totally do like a Pip deck month. That would be a lot of fun. Might like add that to my list of like things I want to do at some point. Anyway, this was really fun to pull out a bunch of my Pip decks and to play with pairing them up. I would love to know if you have any of these decks, what you like to pair with, what your favorite Pip deck is, and do you pair it with Oracle? Do you have a favorite Oracle to pair with it? So definitely feel free to share with me in the comments below. As always, you'll find links for everything I've shown here in the description box of this video. Thank you so much for hanging out with me today, and I look forward to sharing with you again soon.